to declare the committee in recess at any point.
I don't have any objections. Does anybody else have any objections?
I
do
not.
Okay,
okay,
all right.
10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material in today's meeting, and further, its approval to release deposition material that accompanies release of the Select Committee's final report. Good afternoon, and may God bless the United States of America. To cast a vote in the United States is an act of faith and hope. When we drop that ballot in the ballot box, we expect the people named on the ballot are going to uphold their end of the deal. The winner swears an oath and upholds it. Those who come up short ultimately accept the results and abide by the rule of law. That faith in our system is the foundation of American democracy. If the faith is broken, so is our democracy.
Should we bring John Rothmann in to just watch this with us a little bit, and then he may want to throw in? Hey, John Rothmann. John Rothmann, everybody, yeah.
But he chose to try to stay in office through a multi-part scheme to overturn the results and block the transfer of power. In the end, he summoned a mob to Washington, and knowingly they were armed and angry, pointed them to the Capitol and told them to fight like hell. There's no doubt about this. This afternoon, my colleagues will present our key findings, reminding you of some of the information we presented in earlier hearings and telling you how it fits in our broader conclusions. Those conclusions have helped shape the committee's final report, which we'll adopt today pursuant to House Resolution 503, which establishes the Select Committee nearly a year and a half ago. I expect our final work will be filed with the Clerk of the House and made public later this week. Beyond that release, the Select Committee intends to make public the bulk of its non-sensitive records before the end of the year.
So they are essentially laying out the fact that they are going to essentially review, but now bring into some sort of coherence in the final report and presentation today the plot on the part of Trump and his henchmen, or the advisors, what do you want to call Giuliani and Eastman and, this rogues gallery of people who were gathering around the president to try to maintain power. You could have a view, John Rothmann, of this initially that, well, it was a lot of anger on the part of the public, on the part of Trump supporters. They bought this notion that the election was stolen. They were animated by the Trump words, but there was no real intention in an organized way to do something. You could have said that until you saw the work of this committee. They really did lay out what he's just mentioning now in summary, the fact that Trump and his Giulianis and the Eastmans of the world, even Mark Meadows, et cetera, they were all involved. And I would suggest that there were United States legislators who apparently were involved in these text messages that now have gotten out, who are all involved in a real effort to maintain power at whatever cost. That's a coup. This was an organized coup, first by, quote, legal means, but then ultimately by violent means. So this is what the committee is reviewing now, and this is what they will present as a report. And ultimately, it sounds as though they will make recommendations to the Justice Department, again, largely symbolic, but nonetheless, criminal charges against the President of the United States is a very big deal.
I agree with you. By the way, I'm very happy to be with you. This is a historic day. We have never had a situation where a former president of the United States is actually being accused of sedition, of obstruction, of attempting to tamper with the very process of American democracy, which is what Benny Thompson was alluding to. You are correct that this is an investigation where the materials will be forwarded to the Department of Justice. The committee cannot, on its own, issue any indictment, but they can, and they will, refer to the Justice Department the appropriate information. I know we're also going to talk about Hanukkah, but let me point out to you that last night, Merrick Garland lit the candle for the first night of Hanukkah and talked in his remarks about the importance of justice and the American system. That's what's on trial.
Is there a special Jewish prayer, John, for criminal charges being levied against the president, or is that?
It reminds me of that famous line from Fiddler on the Roof. Is there a prayer for the czar? And the rabbi responds very wisely, God bless and keep the czar far away from us. So I would suggest to you that is the general sense. But there's another element which you just mentioned, which I want to allude to. And that is the committee is considering referring to their own internal House panel disciplinary charges against members of Congress. And we know who they are. That will go nowhere because the Republicans are going to control the House. But the fact that there is a reference to that committee is something that is also very important. But we know that the Republicans have prepared a response. They aren't talking about Donald Trump. They want to talk about why the House and Senate were not prepared for this kind of attack. It is a complete diversion. It has no relevance to the particular issues here. And so one of the things that we will be hearing later on, and I'm going to be listening avidly when we are finished with our broadcast, not that I want to miss the Mark Thompson show, but I'm going to be listening avidly to how the committee votes for the referral of criminal proceedings. And let me tell you, it's not, as you just pointed out, it's not just against the former president of the United States.
By the way, John, the great thing about YouTube is you can listen to the show anytime, or watch the show anytime. So you can go ahead and watch the committee. Of course, the committee's also on YouTube. You can watch the committee. Yeah, this has got to be a big question for you today. Do you watch the committee first, or do you listen to the John Rothmann interaction on the Mark Thompson show first? I don't know, but I think I would watch this live, and then I would go back and listen to the committee.
What I'm really going to be listening for are Kim McAllister's news updates.
Yes, she has them, Byron. Now, Kim you can toss in here. There are questions from the audience. First of all, you are getting a lot of love. People really happy to see you. And somebody asked, and I know this may seem like a little of a wild question, but we honor all questions here. Mark asked John Rothmann if an ordinary cop can arrest Trump, could a cop with an attitude go, I've had enough of this, I'm arresting the guy?
No, there would have to be an indictment. And that is what Merrick Garland is going to do. There will be at least three, there could be more, but there are at least three areas, which we've enumerated already, dealing with the question of Donald Trump's culpability. That's the beginning of it. And if the Justice Department brings that to a grand jury and there is an indictment, then Donald Trump can be indicted. Now, let me remind you that Leon Jaworski, during the Watergate process, never said that a president of the United States couldn't be indicted, or a former president. The Watergate grand jury issued an unindicted co-conspirator charge against Richard Nixon. But now that Donald Trump is out of office, the correct procedure will be to see whether he violated the law, then bring the indictment, and then let justice play out. Let me offer one other observation, because if we're going to have people questioning, I don't believe Donald Trump will ever go to jail. I think what will happen is that in a real court of law, if it comes to that, he will be convicted on at least two of the three charges, and that then, in order to avoid a former president going to jail, clemency would be granted. And as Christmas is right around the corner, let me remind everyone that Eugene V. Debs, who was the socialist candidate for president of the United States, received 1 million votes in 1920, was in prison at the time for sedition, and Warren Harding didn't pardon him. He granted clemency, which means that the conviction would stand, but the former president would not go to jail.
And it's so appropriate that you would mention that, because I just see a remarkable circling of the wagons on both sides for the institutions that are in Washington and are of government. You see this often with institutions of all sorts, educational institutions. I think you saw it, I'll give you an outrageous example, at Penn State, where you had, this football coach covering for another football coach who was essentially a sexual predator. And you had them close ranks around him. You see the Catholic Church do the same thing when it comes to sexual predators. They want to protect the institution of the church, and so do Washington. There's a great desire to protect the institutions of government, the presidency, which we have elevated to this level of respect in some ways, and yet it has been denigrated. I would suggest the last presidency, and there are other presidencies as well that haven't been so great to the office. But the last presidency really, just was full of recklessness and pay to play, and as we saw, it culminated in a coup attempt. So, John, when you talk about clemency and you talk about the legal machinations that may follow, I think of these things that they do in Washington. Everybody's, in a way, in on it to try to protect the institutions of the presidency and beyond.
With all due respect, I'm going to disagree with you. I think that the American people are fed up with Donald Trump. I don't think it's just Democrats. I think it's Republicans as well. What is on trial here are two things, in my judgment. One is Donald Trump, the individual. Did he commit sedition? Did he attempt to subvert the American process? That's one question. The second question is for the Republicans themselves. They do not want to be identified with someone who commits these kinds of acts. And so you are now seeing within the Republican Party a question of whether or not they can separate themselves from Donald Trump. And the best indication of that, if I may be so bold as to say, is Mike Pence. I just finished reading his autobiography. And it's not a great book, but it tells his story and his outrage at Donald Trump. So my hope is that will happen. There's a third element here, which I know is not on the agenda today, but perhaps we can talk about another time, because I'm happy to appear with you guys anytime. And that has to do with the battle for the Republican leadership and maybe the speakership of the House of Representatives, which is coming up in January. The Congress reconvenes on January 3rd. There will then be a vote by the Republicans. There are about 5 or 6, depending upon what number you want to use, who oppose Kevin McCarthy. And it means that also will be an issue because Donald Trump has endorsed Kevin McCarthy. So there's a lot going on here of internal dynamic. And let me also quickly point out that for Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who have been the two Republicans on the committee, this is the end of the road. Liz Cheney was defeated at the primary. Adam Kinzinger chose not to run again.
Well, it's the end of the legislative road. They may have greater political designs.
That's exactly what I mean. It is the end of a legislative road because this committee will expire with the new Congress.
Yeah. Someone is asking why, I thought it was, where is Mike's, here it is. So why would we even indict Trump, John Rothmann? If there's no punishment, he's not going to jail, and he can run for president, why do it to begin with?
For the same reason that Richard Nixon had to accept a pardon, or else he would have gone to jail. It is a matter of the historical record. What makes this session today so critical is the vote that they will take in a few hours to formally refer to the Department of Justice criminal charges. Everyone needs to understand the magnitude in terms of the American political system of this action, and it will put every Republican on the spot. I'm very curious as to how Republicans will respond, and I mean primarily the Republicans who are mainstream Republicans, not the extremists. That's the other problem, of course, Kevin McCarthy has. He has the handful of very extreme Republicans. As I would point out, Nancy Pelosi had to deal with very extreme Democrats in her caucus, the squad, if you will. And how you contain these extremist elements within your caucus is going to be critical. It will depend on how Kevin McCarthy handles that as to whether or not he becomes Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Smash the like button for John Rothmann, who we really love having him on the show, and he'll you heard it, he'll drop through regularly anytime.
Anytime you want me, because let me tell you, I get a lot of emails, Mark, a lot of people listening to you. A lot of people have asked me if I would be willing to participate with you, and the answer is absolutely 100%.
I love it. I love it. I really do. Well, I just think, I'm crazy about you, but your insights are so appreciated by everyone else as well. So I now will make this pivot, but you are our unofficial rabbi, so I want to ask you, today is the first day of Hanukkah. We have our Hanukkah background up for all our Jewish boys and girls. Although I have to say, did you see the New York Times crossword puzzle thing? I
saw and everybody can Google it.
You don't need to Google it. We're going to show it to you. There it is.
Now, take a look, ladies and gentlemen, and what you will see is a swastika, the symbol of Nazi Germany.
Does it have like an extra arm?
The outrage, yeah, it's a hook cross.
Yeah.
And so there was great outrage. Is it a mistake? Should have been caught? Do people really look at it? Who knows what the answer is? But I can tell you, to do it on the first night of Hanukkah is certainly not in the spirit of the season, so to speak.
Yeah, it is not.
And this is their new hoax.
Yeah. All right. So, John, let's talk about Hanukkah. Now, Hanukkah, give us the story. There's always a story. All religions have stories, and this is one of the world's oldest faiths, right? So tell us about this story that goes with Hanukkah.
All right, let me first of all say that the book of Maccabees is not found in the Jewish scriptures. You will find it in the Catholic scripture.
That's where this story comes from, the book of Maccabees?
That's correct.
Okay.
And there's Maccabee 1 and Maccabee 2. But the bottom line is it was a celebration of freedom, a struggle by the weak against the strong, against a mighty empire that could not be beaten, and they were defeated. And of course, the story goes that when the temple was cleansed, there's an eternal light, in Hebrew, the Ner Tamid, and that Ner Tamid was never supposed to go out. And you had to keep it going with oil, little vats of oil. Well, they had no oil, but miracle of miracles, they found a little container of oil, and that little container burned for 8 days, which is why Hanukkah is an 8-day holiday. Of course, so you understand, most Jewish holidays last 8 days when you deal with Sukkot or Simchat Torah. But, the important element here is that it was a celebration of freedom. It is not a major holiday on the Jewish calendar. It is a minor holiday, but it is something important. And let me point one other thing out to you. You traditionally are religiously private, right? But not with Hanukkah. During Hanukkah, you are supposed to take your Hanukkah, that's the proper name for the Hanukkah menorah, a Hanukkah, and put it in your front window so that everyone can see it. And the point was to be proud of who you are and also to wage that good battle. I mentioned Merrick Garland earlier, lighting the first candle last night. Merrick Garland is a Jew. He's a proud Jew. He makes no bones about it. And one of the things that he sees in the celebration of Hanukkah, and you can read it in his comments, is the implication for freedom. So when we talk about Donald Trump, when we talk about the insurrection, when we talk about what happened, why we react so strongly, it was an attack on our freedom. And as the Maccabees fought for their freedom, so we Americans must continually battle to make sure that our democracy is preserved. And what happened on January 6th was an assault on our democracy.
Wow. I know. Everything Rothmann says feels like it's an applause line. It's really great. It was like, and that's why you and I should stand up against authoritarianism. And I mean, John, you're very, you're almost you're like a Shakespearean actor, I feel like. When I used to listen to your show all the time, I used to say to everybody, God, it's just like everything he says. It's not only what he says, it's how he says it. It's just great. So
I appreciate that. May I say, Gene Burns' birthday would have been on December 3rd. And whenever I think of what I do on the radio, and Mark, what we all do on the radio, it is to live up to that standard, not only of brilliance in terms of mind, but in terms of the way we express ourselves. That's why people listen to us, and that's why they will, I hope, continue to listen to us right here on the Mark Thompson podcast.
Well, definitely please return, John. We'll be in touch with you. Everybody is showing you love and asking for your quick return, so we will exploit our relationship with you, of course, just for our own gain. But it really is they're also telling you to launch your own channel. I will tell you something, though, just between us girls. It's a total pain in the ass. Don't launch your own channel.
No, may I tell you, I've had people ask me, and so, Mark, I want to indicate to you I'm willing to participate as much as you would like. I have nothing but respect for what you're trying to do, and Kim is trying to do, and John and the others, to preserve the spirit of KGO. I must tell you, I get every day, every single day, emails from listeners who wonder, where are you? Why aren't you there? And so anything I can do to promote this as a team, as we've always been, I am prepared to do.
Totally awesome. And we look forward to your return visit. We'll watch this J6 referral, and maybe we can unpack that next week as well, John.
We will please convey to your parents and to all of our listeners a very happy Hanukkah, and may you all eat a lot of potato latkes.
Happy Hanukkah. Good to see
John
your face.
Rothman, everybody. Come on, John Rothman. Good stuff. Thanks so